Okay, calm down.
The occupation of the Gaza Strip begins in 1967. 70% of the population of Gaza consists of refugees and children and descendants of those refugees. So it's overwhelmingly a refugee population. As we've already established, it's also a child population. And it came under Israeli occupation. Now, here are the basic facts, and I'm going to try to do it quickly. It's actually a complex picture, but I will try to simplify it. Number one, in 2006, there were elections held in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank. The elections were urged upon the Palestinians, not least by then President Bush. Among others, Jimmy Carter, the former US president, among others, he was a witness to the elections. He pronounced them, and now I'm quoting him, completely honest and fair. It happened, it surprised everybody, including Hamas, but Hamas won the elections, the parliamentary elections. Immediately as the results came in from these free, completely honest and fair elections, Israel, followed by the United States and the EU, imposed a brutal blockade on Gaza. Since 2006, there has been this brutal blockade on Gaza. Nobody can go in, nobody can go out, with the rarest of exceptions. Gaza is 25 miles long, 5 miles wide. What does that mean? The 5 miles wide, if you're a New Yorker, and some of your listeners will probably be New Yorkers, 5 miles is the distance from NYU to Columbia University. NYU on West 4th Street, Columbia University on 116th Street. That's the width of Gaza. The length of Gaza is 27 miles, 25 miles, excuse me. It's shorter than a marathon. So if you can picture in your mind a marathon as the length and the width, the distance from NYU to Columbia, that's Gaza. Gaza is among the most densely populated areas in the world. It's more densely populated than Tokyo. As of now, the numbers they vacillate over a period, but as of now, 50% of the people in Gaza are unemployed. Among youth, which is predominantly the folks who broke through the gate, the unemployment rate is 60%. Half the population is classified by international humanitarian organizations as suffering from, I'll use the technical phrase, severe food insecurity.
Right.
So, the picture I just described has more or less endured, that more or less picture, has endured for 2 decades. The folks who broke through the gate have lived that life of joblessness, hunger, not starvation, hunger, hopelessness, despondency, despair, depression for 20 years. A large part of that population had to endure in the most direct of ways the results of Israel's various murderous operations. Family members killed, homes flattened, and all the rest.
Not being able to leave for medical
Not,
procedures.
as I said, with the rarest of exceptions, nobody goes in, nobody goes out. So, if you put all those pieces together, those discrete pieces of data, if you put them all together, it's unsurprising that the conservative Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, described Gaza as an open air prison. One of Israel's eminent sociologists, Baruch Kimmerling from the Hebrew University, he described Gaza as, quote, the largest concentration camp ever. So I skimmed the surface. Time doesn't allow to do more than that. Now, I put this question to Israel's defenders. They say Israel has the right to self-defense, and therefore Herzog is in the right when he says we have the right to target everybody in Gaza, every man, woman, and child. We have the right to exterminate them, because that's what no water, no fuel, no food, and no electricity means. I don't think even Israel's defenders can dispute. Now remember, the last major Israeli operation, Operation Protective Edge, lasted 51 days. If what Netanyahu is saying is correct, if what Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying is correct, we're talking about no food, no water, no electricity, and no fuel for a lot more than 51 days. So I think it's hard to dispute that that's not a plan for genocide. Without trying to be evocative,
Right.
just trying to stick to the facts. So now let's return to the question. If you claim that Israel has the right to self-defense, I would ask, do the Palestinians have the right to free themselves from the largest concentration camp ever? Now, you might say, okay, now we have arguments on both sides. I would have to say no. I would ask your listeners to ask themselves the question. It's a very simple question. I wrote an article about it with my colleague, comrade, Jamie Stern Weiner. The title was, you can find it somewhere in Jacobin. The title was, it was in 2018 during the Great March of Return, and the Palestinians tried nonviolently to break the siege. And even human rights organizations were referring to Israel's right of self-defense. I have to say I found that quite appalling. And so I and Jamie Stern Weiner co-authored an article under the title, I think you can find it, Katie, if you do a little research. It's called, Do Concentration Camp Guards Have the Right to Self-Defense? Do concentration camp guards have the right to self-defense? To me, maybe because of my family background, I'm a little partisan on this issue. I think that's a rhetorical question. I think the answer is obviously not. I think the occupants, the inmates of a concentration camp, have the right to break free. My view is that they don't have a right of self-defense. I have to add 2 points. It's covering a lot of ground, and I want to give you and also listeners an opportunity to interrogate me. The first point is the claim is that how can they have a right to self-defense if they want to destroy Israel? The factual record shows, I can't go through all of it now, and you'll forgive me if I refer to my book, but I go through it quite carefully, the factual record in my book, Gaza, an inquest into its martyrdom. Hamas was prepared to recognize Israel and to engage in negotiations on the basis of international law. Now, I want to be very careful about this because I'm an old-fashioned leftist who believes that there's no contradiction between my politics and truth. As Antonio Gramsci famously said, the Italian Marxist, the truth is revolutionary. And I have abided by that dictum the whole of my adult life, and even part of my non-adult life, the belief that there's no contradiction between the two. So there are many statements by Hamas saying it was prepared to settle the conflict on what's called the two-state settlement. Now, it is true, and I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not out to score points. I'm out to try to give your listeners an accurate picture. It is true that Hamas insisted that as part of the two-state settlement, it had to include the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to Israel. And I'm perfectly, even though that's legally a correct position, I recognize as a practical matter, it raises serious issues. And the only way to resolve it is to go into negotiations and try to see if you can find a resolution of that problem. I shouldn't call it a problem, a resolution of that issue. So it is not true that Hamas has been committed from its inception up until today to the destruction of the state of Israel. That is, and I think there's a wealth of documentary evidence to support it, that is a factually incorrect statement. So then I think that argument has been tentatively answered by myself, but you could check the documentation and argue with me.